This always feels nerve-wracking.
It's a participatory experience.
There you go. Meta references. Good morning, Valeria.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Ah.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Matthew.
Good present moment to everyone, whenever you are, even those of you in the future.
Yes. Well, welcome in the Mining for Vervaeke podcast. And today we are discussing participatory knowing. So, John Vervaeke formulated 4 different kinds of knowing: participatory, perspectival, procedural, and propositional. Participatory knowing refers to knowing how to act in the agent arena environment. It is simultaneously one of the most basic and most profound kinds of knowing. One way to think about participatory knowledge is to consider the difference between being in a state of confusion versus in a state of flow. And yeah, if you guys understood anything of what I talked about, give me a shout out in the comments. Otherwise, we will have to unfold it. And in the room, I welcome Valeria and Adrenon from Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server. So I would like to ask Valeria to unpack anything I just read.
Maybe the most basic. I'll start with the most basic kind of knowing, because the way I understand it, at least, participatory knowing it's the basis of your contact with the world. It's so basic that it doesn't even feel like something that you know. It just feels like something that is, or something that you are. It's the I remember John talking in one of his talks of knowing by being. It's the things that you know because they are interwoven in the fabric of who you are and how you see the world and the basis of your interaction with the world. So I think that's what I'm looking at. That's what I'll start. Yeah.
All right. And I guess I'll emphasize the dance nature, where it's participatory knowing has to be like a back and forth, which implies that you're in direct contact. And that happens, I think, with the natural world a lot. So that's sort of a natural place that we think about participating in something like in a physical sense. And that probably is most of what is there for me with participatory knowing. But there's also, it works in the conceptual space too. Like, I don't know, probably gets confusing if I do that. I'll leave that for the moment and say mostly for me, it's the participatory and the physical, but that it has to be like an interactive, like you're touching it and changing and doing. And then it, of course, has its own attributes, whatever it is. And so you have to shape yourself to it. Maybe it changes in response. And so there's this interplay between two that happens with participatory knowing that's, different, say, from somebody giving you something to read.
I really like that idea of interaction with the environment. So your participation in the actual environment you're in. I was thinking in today's world where you can have an environment of, let's say, a video game, and you're participating in the game with other people. Is that a good example of participating in reality?
Oh, it's so good until you said reality.
Yes.
I think that's a valid, I don't want to say like it's good. It's a valid example of participatory knowing. And if you've done that before, where you get so involved in, say, a video game like Capture the Flag or something, where there's a strategy that multiple people have to partake in order to win against this other team who are also people. I mean, it's all virtually shown, but it's other people who are struggling at their computers in order to capture your flag and so on. You get caught up in that. Like that becomes an actual thing in your head, like this struggle of us and them, and oh, I got to get that, and oh, get that one. So all of that together, that moment, that flow of playing that game, that's like you can write about that and and you can read about it. But like if you played that and then someone talked about it, it's going to resonate with you in a way where you're like, oh yeah, I know what you mean. Like I have experienced it myself by participating in such a thing. It has all the attributes of what you're describing. Oh yeah. And if you hadn't participated in it yourself, like you'd never played video games, you'd be like, yeah, I could see that'd be very, yeah, it would be like you're working with a team. But the participatory knowing, there's going to be a lot of other aspects to it that aren't maybe even crystallized into words. So, hand off to Valeria if she wants to add anything there. I don't know if we have to go on like a strict.
It's a conversation.
Okay.
I'm curious about why the example of a video game as opposed to a game that you play with your body.
In a weird sense, it seemed the most relatable to the audience that watches YouTube videos. It's like it's a flow. People who spend their time in front of the screen watching other people conversing logically have experience with video gaming and interacting with others through the screen as well somehow. So that's the example of participation. Yeah, you're right. We can discuss the participation in a game, let's say, that you play with the environment together. And for participatory knowing, it's not necessarily with other people, but it is participating in environment, right? Agent arena kind of relationship.
I mean,
or am I missing something?
If you're with other people, then participating together is, certainly they become part of the dynamic. And it's a we that are participating, depending on the agreed rules of the situation. But I agree that, you can have participatory, like artists will know this from working with some piece of whatever, sculpture, or painting, or creating something that doesn't happen in an instant. That there's like, a push and a back and forth and playing with material, and the material going like, yeah, no, it's not going to do that. And that becomes that's a participatory knowing that there's not another person involved. So I think it happens both ways. And when there's more than one person, then there's, of course, group dynamics and all sorts of interesting human things.
I always tend to think about the very, very basic things of cognition. So like knowing water, knowing what a cup is, not knowing intellectually what a cup is, like the way my hand goes to grab it and knows exactly what amount of force to put in it without me having to think about it. If I would think about it, I'd probably fuck it up. But this really, this knowing. And with drinking, there is something really, really interesting. If you think about how does the water move from the cup to the mouth, most people think that you're pouring it right? That it's like gravity is the
It's more
force that
sucking.
it's more sucking than gravity.
Are you gonna mess up everybody's drink? All right, everybody drink.
Hmm?
You're right.
You have been doing that your whole life and you don't know how you drink. You know how to drink, but you don't know how you drink.
Right. And if you'd have
That
put
for
it in
me,
rules, if you'd have described it, you probably prior to that point, you probably would have described it wrong. You pour liquid into your mouth. Like,
if you try to do it, it's super cumbersome. You go.
I'm not even gonna because get all over myself.
Mm.
And that's a good example. It's a little bit difficult because it's hard to look at like what are all the things that I must do to pick up a cup to put it to my face, and then be ready to drink it. But just like swimming is, I love that example where like everybody is the same body, let's say, human-y, and if assuming they can move their limbs in that space of people, let's say, everybody can swim, and you can describe how to swim, and you can write the rules down, and you have like a nice couple paragraphs, which would probably tell you everything procedurally that you need to know about swimming. But then until you've tread water for yourself for a while, and then you develop sort of a comfort level with it, you kind of know how much you float or don't float, or which things will keep you above water, when you're in control, when you're not in control, all the little nuances of swimming. You get to know all those things by participating in it.
Yeah.
So it's not like communicable in language the same way. Some things you got to do.
You get to know the water, and you get to know yourself in the water, your interaction with the water.
Yeah. Like, how am I, like, what's my buoyancy? Like,
Yeah.
and that's like a direct relationship between your body and the water. I do scuba diving. And so this idea of like passing into a different world and a different perspective and things like that, I've started to think of diving like that. And you pass through the surface of the water when you start to dive. So all the analogies that come with that are present.
Mhm. We have audience live participating with us, and there is a comment for Valeria from Quota. Shout out the Quota. I appreciate how Valeria said to know is also to be. That is tapping into a very sacred understanding of what Parmenides means when he says to think and to be are one and the same. Excellent. And we also have Wolfie, who talks about difficulty of perceiving reality due to an illness. So of late, he had been learning to engage with selective parts of reality. Sorry, guys, sorry. And also a process of letting go of controlling everything too, and just accepting it. I think it's sort of like this Zen being in the world. Yeah. And a lot from Quote as well, and Upcycle Club. Thank you, guys. The quota, a struggle I experienced as a child was when I played games like soccer. I did not know why I should be playing or winning. Oh, that's an interesting question in participating with other.
Yeah, like if the group takes on the we want to win and you're part of the we, then that dynamic can work in a sporting or effort. From my own childhood, there were a lot of times where I was not able to join one of those we's very easily. So, and I was a chubby kid too, so that really did not help my athletics.
I'm just imagining you as a chubby kid.
Super chubby, still chubby. Anyway, the you know, so I'm not adept at, say, whatever the sport is, and so then you're less likely to be chosen because they want to form a winning team and blah blah blah. Anyway, there's a lot of dynamics that happen, especially in a kid's head, about that. And so, you know, when we say like participating in sports, for example, there's a ton of lessons and reflections, and some of them confused, that go on, you know, by being chosen or not being chosen, or being on the winning team or being on the losing team, having played a good game, having missed the big shot, disappointments expressed by your teammates, all sorts of interpersonal dynamics that occur by, quote, playing, you know, participating in sports. So I guess again, there I'm just pointing at like this participatory knowing feels like it gets into a lot of the little nooks and crannies of a thing as you're doing it. There are a lot of aspects.
It's interesting. How do we participate in reality? How do we experience everything that outside if we are not really understanding what is going on? Let's say participation in a game without clearly understanding if the group expects you to win, or the group expects you to just be there and hold a place. Because contrary to others, it's from a child's mind, it's not obvious at all. Like somehow there are mixed messages. You can just participate and like participate in the game without any aim. Just be and observe reality. You can just stand in the middle of the field, or do what others are doing. And others are also don't really, like, everybody does the best they can, and usually they follow one leader who tells them what to do. And so there is this knowing and understanding. They are kind of they're codependent as far as I'm concerned. What do you think, guys? Valeria?
So what I'm thinking is, if you don't know why the people are playing the game or why you are supposed to win, in a way you're not participating with them in the same thing. You're lacking the participatory knowledge of the game that they are playing, because you're not occupying the same space that they are. They are doing something that is fun for them and has meaning for them, and you are not doing the same thing that they are doing somehow. You're standing there and you are like going through the motions, but for the thing that they are doing is different than the thing that you are doing, because for them it has this intrinsic value, it has this fun, it has this meaning. And for me, just being there, it's the same physical space. It's the same physical space, but the game that they are playing, I'm not really participating in. That is what comes to my mind right now.
To that, I would say, like, you are always participating in something, but like in that case, when you're interacting with others and you're trying to all participate in the same thing, like you can really feel that disconnection tangibly. If you've ever gone, when you were describing that, Valeria, it made me think. I went to I don't know what tradition it was. It was a Zen something, local group. And I went there, and their traditions was a beautiful building, and they had little seated meditation places all around the big room, big empty floor. And their tradition was to sit for, I think it was an hour, in absolute silence and stillness facing the wall, with no Dharma talk and no anything. And not knowing this, I went, I visited, I was welcomed, I sat. But I really felt like that most everyone else in that room had a very different experience of that whole thing than I did. Like I was not participating with it like they were. It was too big a span for me to jump.
You did not know. It's like you're in a different arena than they are.
Yeah, and things can be explained. It's occurred to me like when people develop a language, even some of the Vervaekeisms or whatever, you could come into a room and people start throwing those around and you think, uh-oh, these people are talking a different language. And it sounds foreign, and it sounds like they know what they're talking about or whatever. And then that's off-putting. That makes you feel like you're not part of the we. I've experienced that before, usually in regards to like religious congregations where they have a very detailed thing that they have built together. And then when you visit, you can see little glimpses of it, but you get the idea that there's a lot more that you're not seeing, that you don't quite know yet.
So you basically need more modes of knowing beside the participatory one in order to be fully immersed in the arena. So the other modes, like it's a procedural or perspectival, they're also important. Just purely being there and participating without a background and the context would not do it, right?
Would not do it.
I mean, it
lot.
would. I mean, you would still participate.
I'm comfortable saying. I mean, I like
Mhm.
pointing at participatory knowing and saying that there are a lot of ways that you develop your understanding and conceptions of the world, and a very big aspect is you personally participating in it and interacting with it. And then I like to contrast that with other things in the modern world where you're not interacting, like you're just consuming. So like everything that you just watch, you're like, I watched, I listened, but there's very little flow back, and there's certainly no back and forth. I have a project about that. Anyway, so for me, as opposed to like trying to figure out which types of knowing are there and how do they fit together, and I have too much of this and little of that, and it's just more of the realization is that there are a lot of different ways that and there are subtleties there, and by using all these different concepts, you can see more and try to build conceptions. I don't want to make it sound like there's one thing you're trying to figure out. I conceive of reality where everybody has a reality in their head. That's what we're actually looking at from our minds. We look at our models of what we have built of the world. And so we actually have however many people, we have that many realities. And then we need to strive to build a consensus reality on top of that, where we say, yeah, there's the physical world. We can agree on that part pretty much. But then all the other constructs that people add in, and what things mean and what's important and what's not, and all that, we have to come to consensus on. And so that part of reality is consensus. So when people say like, I'm seeking truth, I'm like, uh-oh. So for me, that's more like trying to come to a consensus reality where you can say like, yeah, that part of my reality, and we seem to agree totally on that. And I think the way you find that is by this participatory back and forth, saying what you see, saying what they see, saying, trying to come to that consensus by interacting, by participating with one another. I feel like I may have meandered a bit there.
No, but I was thinking about we have to come to a consensus seems a little bit. You learn about reality. Ideally, you will learn about reality with others, and then the shared reality is the reality that you learn. You start from the consensus, and then you individuate.
Well, but the thing you were learning from, like, who made that? And so then somebody handed that to you and said, here, and you were like, oh, okay. And so you took that, and then like that's how you formed the consensus. And I think, this is how I experienced my childhood. And then you learn as you get to be an adult that a lot of the things that you learn aren't actually right. And it becomes a lot more complex. And a lot of people go in a lot of different directions. And so some aspects of, this consensus shared reality are getting frayed. It feels like that. Like if we were all born in, people who were born at the same time that I was, we have a certain connection and I can talk to them and we make references to TV programs and things because we have that kind of that part of our reality was shared. But the world is much broader now with so many people in contact at different ages and different experiences. So like the consensus reality is kind of a mash right now.
Yeah. And also at odds very often. Like
people go ahead.
People who experience realities because of the internet. People are easier grouping together. They found alike individuals. So you would think the knowledge would be expanded and diversified, and everybody, oh my God, I have expanded, diversified my knowledge to the universal. What I observed is people find others who experienced the same things and who kind of aligned with the same views and ideas, and they group together and get into those sort of echo chambers where they confirm everyone's worldview, and everybody outside of this confirmation bubble, let's say, is perceived as wrong and stuff like that,
or uninformed.
Or uninformed.
They just need to be given the word.
Or saved.
Or saved. This, like the phenomenon, the tech has changed maybe the dynamics and the flow and the frequency and all that. And you're carrying around a screen in your pocket. But the phenomenon of it, I think, has been with us. It's a human thing to do that we've been doing to form up, quote, echo chambers. Like there will be beliefs that are very common in Salt Lake City, Utah here. Because like a Mormon group settled there and then more Mormons went there. And at the time it wasn't very popular. And so eventually it became, there's so many Mormons there and there's so much belief in the doctrines of that church there that it's almost like a different reality. Because you can live in a space where everybody that you meet who's part of the church, who follows whatever the teachings are, and I don't know them in any great detail, but they're forming that kind of reality for one another, and so they form that echo chamber, and that was all before the internet. So this idea of kind of forming echo chambers where you keep hearing the same stuff and it's circulating back, and you're like, yeah, we've been doing that in different degrees.
But I think we are losing the capacity to participate with other people, to really, Wolf wrote here in the comments, like reality is experiential, and I think that's a very good way of talking about participatory knowledge. So one thing that I was thinking, for example, is that a child in front of the TV, the child is experiencing all these emotions and showing it in her face, and nobody cares. If I the child cries, if the child laughs, the person on the TV react exactly the same.
Oh, I see.
That must do something to that little brain that is forming. It's like the contact, how people get in contact with each
Yeah.
other. It's not happening there because there are faces, but the faces don't care about
Don't
me.
react.
Yeah, there's
That-
no participation between me and that face that is producing all these emotions in me. So
And the kid is going to have to deal with the fact that some faces do interact with them, i.e. their parents and caregivers. But then other things just don't. Like this is will be an obvious message to that young mind that they live in a world where sometimes the faces react and sometimes you just listen. It's kind of disturbing to think about it that way. Like if you had a kid who's left alone in a room and then the thing doesn't respond and they're just like, it's entertaining. I'm drawn to it. It's tasty. It makes me laugh and emote, but it doesn't respond. So that for me, like that's the antithesis of participatory knowing.
yeah.
You're like you're sort of experiencing the story, like somebody wrote a story and it has some emotional arcs and things, and so you are participating with it in that sense, but it doesn't, it's only like it sends something and then you react. There's no next reaction after that. There's no interaction.
I'm just suddenly thought of even worse cases where, like, one thing the TV set and the entertainers on the screen do not react to a kid interacting with it, but imagine they do, or like they give an illusion of interaction, but everything is drawn and off. What message does it give to a kid? So the kid is responding blue, and the narrator, "You're right, kids, it's red." And then it's gone, and the kid like, "Didn't you just? I said blue," like completely ignored. So this is somehow even worse. I feel like.
I saw an example of something that I thought it became technically possible. And so the geek in me was like, oh, this is neat. And then the junior sociologist in me was like, oh, that is a very bad idea. And what it was they'd made, I think it was a dinosaur. I love you. Okay. Anyway, they made that little
It was
dinosaur.
Barney. I know.
Barney. They made a little purple dinosaur doll, Barney, right, to sing the song and yada yada. And it was a doll that you would buy and have at home in front of the TV with the kid. And then the doll would react to the TV because they would put like QR codes or something to trip it to, do this, do that. So basically, the doll would interact with the TV by digital connection to it. And then, if it puts its arms in the air, then the kid's like, oh, everybody's putting their arms in the air. So, man, that twists the reality because now it looks just like interaction. And there's a physical doll in the room that's laughing and doing the appropriate things at the appropriate time. And it responds to what's going on the screen. And so from the kid's perspective, this is all just like a normal, this is what happens. And so it's blending the whole concept of like, no, there's like reality that you live in, and then you can watch things. And this like crosses that line and says, yeah, and sometimes they interact. And it struck me that is a very complicated world to put a kid in, where the line between their physical reality and what they're watching on a screen, which is already complicated enough, as you pointed out, Valeria, like there's a disconnection there. But then to add it back in, oh no, it does interact with the physical world around you. Look at the little doll dancing next to you, or saying something.
But it does.
The
doll.
What's
the
that?
doll also doesn't. The doll also doesn't care for you. If there's a loud noise and I look at the noise, like if you're in a room and there is a loud noise, everybody's going to look.
That is an awesome subroutine that every like automated dog toy needs to have. Like whenever you hear a loud noise, whatever program you're running, it should stop and look at it. From Valeria.
The shared attention is something that is very powerful. Or another example, if I don't know, if you're interacting with a kid and you are doing all the silly things and the kid is laughing and all of a sudden they, for some reason, tummy ache, like do a little sad expression, you as a real adult, you react to that. It's like, oh, what happened? It's does this, what you feel, what you display in your emotional expression is important. But if the kid is sitting in front of the TV doesn't care. It's like,
yeah,
I feel sad and they continue being happy as if I didn't existed.
And there's those little interactions. There can be so much participatory experience. You made me think of like somebody skinning their knee. Like you've got a kid, I don't know, let's say 5 years old, and they trip and they skin their knee and they're upset and it hurts. And then you're like, okay, what is the reality you're going to help that kid create there? You know, are you going to be like, oh my God? Or are you going to be like, all right, let's see what we're doing. Oh man, yeah, let's rinse that off. Okay, how are we doing? You know, and if you're stalwart about it and you're like, it's a flesh wound, whatever, like you can set a tone and then the kid can latch into that and, you know, straighten up and be like, all right, it's a scuff. All that comes from like, you know, a parent or a caretaker who is like actively participating, reading the expressions on the kid's face, seeing if they can navigate that story or not. You know, what does the kid need in this situation? There's so much that comes from like participating, you know, like in a very detailed way. I feel like we should hear from Kara now.
I'm thinking about that reaction with the interaction with the environment and interaction with living beings that react to our participation, let's say. As an example, I was thinking of a shared meal. Let's say people trying out different things and we try, oh my God, that's disgusting, try it.
I love that.
Yeah. I've been to that meal.
I just love it.
John's favorite example.
It's so true. It's just so true.
Have you been to a meal also where like somebody will make something and, you know, you're all just sort of expecting it's nice. And then somebody, like you take the first bite of the main dish and you go like, oh, this is good. Like, this is really good. And then other people at the table are eating it and having like a similar reaction of, oh, this is, wow, I didn't think I'd like, you know, all the comments start flying. And you know that everyone there is having the same experience, like you're eating the same food. And that, like, there are all these things that happen around a table because of that. And there's also dynamics, like you're not really free to get up and leave, especially if like there's social dynamics. So like you don't just get up and leave in the middle of a meal. There has to be a reason or dramatic exit or something, or you excuse yourself. There are all these rules that go on with, you know, no, we are sitting down, we all start at the same time, we finish, we help clean it up. There's like a whole ritual around having a meal together.
Yeah, but like imagine sharing the same experience with a group of people around the same meal, even if you like a little bit break the rules, like you didn't start at the same time, but this shared experience kind of where you all semi-agree with each other. Try it, that's disgusting. Oh yeah, that's disgusting, high five. And like this.
And you're looking for the one guy who's like, oh, I kind of like it.
And then you're like, what's wrong with you? Like, you know, because the group is relentless, basically.
Well, it's fun though. Like when that tension ends up being fun. Like you might even choose to be that guy or gal who's like, I don't know, this Marmite might really catch on.
participation.
My husband loves Marmite.
See, it's always one.
There is always one. Yeah.
I mean, Alexandra is not here, otherwise she would defend the Vegemite.
Vegemite, yeah. There's
Yeah, shout out, Alexandra. Hope you're sleeping pretty well there in Australia. By the way, we have Wolf in comments. He's from the same area as Alexandra, and he's
Is he defending Marmite and Vegemite?
I don't know. So Wolf, what do you think about Marmite? Yeah, Vegemite. That's a difficult one.
It's a difficult one, yeah. I like I have some French Canadian ancestry, and they eat a thing called gâteau, which is it's a boiled meat product. So it's basically some part of the pig, I think, that is fatty and gristly and all that. And so they boil it, and then they put a bunch of spices in it, which includes nutmeg and cinnamon and a couple of interesting things that the Canadians use a lot. And it's one of those foods. It's not as hard as Marmite, I don't think, but it's one where I grew up with it, and I'm like, oh no, it's good. And a lot of people are like, no, it is not.
You know what I'm thinking now? It just occurred to me. Participatory knowing is knowing what you can do with the world. It's knowing the world by knowing how you can interact with it. So, for example, knowing that Marmite is going to give you a terrible experience or a good experience, depending on knowing that the floor is hard and scrapes your knee, knowing it's knowing that the water quenches my thirst, and it's knowing the world by knowing what you can do with it. That's the concept of affordances.
But knowing what you can do with it, like you develop that by doing it. Or
yeah, how do you acquire participatory knowledge?
Participating. Oh, that's an easy one. Finally, an easy question.
I want to let me complicate it for you guys. Just a little twist. 50 Shades of Grey. Everybody heard of that? And so there is
you didn't participate in that way.
Sorry.
Let us all participate in that idea. Okay. So Christian, the protagonist of the story, he introduces the girl, I forgot her name, to the theory of the experience she might enjoy or might also not. He's like, there is this experience, you might like it or not. And she's like, I want to try it. I want to participate in it. And he's like, but I warn you, you might not enjoy it. Like, it's not for everybody. And she's like, I still want to try it. I'm simplifying the book. I'm reading between the lines. I'm inferring a lot as well. So and she's, okay, let me participate in that experience. Then she participates. She's like, ow, I don't actually like it. And she leaves. Spoiler alert. No. And the experience was painful for her. What do we do?
It was literally him hitting her.
Yes. He was like, I will hit you hard 3 times. Or like how many times he was beating her. That was the experience he invited her to participate.
Right, I got it.
Yes. Like the thing is, she wanted to bond with him. She liked him a lot, and she wanted to participate in his reality. Like she wanted to be a part of it. So in order for her to be a part of his reality, she actually needed directly to participate. But that actually was physically painful. Like other than that, everything was fine, except that one thing. And I have a question connected to that. How do we mitigate those differences in our preferences? Because we participated in things, we found what we prefer, and in what arena we would like to function freely. And I was thinking how to navigate through different modes of being without harming others. Let's say, what's her name? And Christian. Why do I remember his name? His name. I do not give the answer. How was it in the book later on? Valeria, what do you think?
I'm thinking if the preferences are not participatory knowledge. It's like I know that I like this and I know that I don't like that through my interaction with it. I know that this is something that is going to give me pleasurable sensations, and that's something that is not going to give me pleasurable sensations. It doesn't answer your question, right? So what I think what you are trying to I'm not going into the 50 Shades of Grey, but let's give an easier example, like for example, negotiating what we're going to have for dinner. Because that's something that I can have different preferences as my husband said, and we kind of need to come to an agreement with that. There is a preference for the food, and there is the preference for making my husband happy, and that they are in conflict there. So, and hopefully my husband will also have a conflict between those two preferences. So in the end, I would say that recognizing that you are losing one thing, I'm losing my preferred food, but I am gaining another. I am gaining the happiness of my husband, which is also something that I would like to have. And sometimes, if my husband wants me to eat Marmite for breakfast every day, then I would probably be more unhappy than my husband would be happy if I eat the Marmite. So it's probably good for us if I don't. Or in the case of that girl that, and she tried to allow herself to get hit to do what the guy wanted. I mean, she tried, right? And in the end, I think her discomfort and pain and disliking ended up being more important than his discomfort and pain and disliking for him not doing the thing that he wanted. Something like that. Don't know if it made sense. Did it make sense?
I'm going to call for a restatement of the question.
How do we let's say we would like to participate in reality with other people, but our preferences are massively different. And I liked Valeria's example of choosing a different thing for dinner.
So to carry on from there, like it's not like you can have a lot of different motivations on any given thing. So we say like, it's my preference, but that's this weird summed up everything in the moment. I had Indian yesterday. There's a lot of things that go into what my preferences are in the moment. So when we say like, oh, it's my preference versus their preference, it's not as crystallized as that. So like your preference space is big and 50 Shades of Gray. Like, I kind of prefer that. Sometimes I don't prefer it. Nah, I'm not into that right now. So it's this mutable space. And then in the case of doing this with another person, man, I don't really want to go into the details of that, but you're kind of navigating with them where their preferences are at the moment and yours. And I would say that you're maybe negotiating that and pushing various aspects by degree, and then seeing how far you could go. And then you're like, oh no, that's too far. And the other person's like, that wasn't too far. That's as far as I'm going with that example. So I I think it echoes what Valeria was saying, which is it's a negotiation, like a dynamic interplay. And I think sort of like a game where if two people simply demand what their preferences are, that's not much of a negotiation. If somebody goes, I want this, then one's like, I want that. Unless there's any more interactions, that's not there's no interplay. And then you just having frozen dinners. Nobody wants that.
Actually, the real life example here is how much chili do we put on the curry? That's the
Levels of heat.
I'm thinking your capacity for a compromise, your personal skills, how do they translate to your ability to participate in the same arena as others? Let's say, are you just going in with a narrow view? If let's say, like, the only way you can express yourself through demand, so demand followed by punishment if people do not obey, let's say, or are you like highly agreeable, but then you kind of forego your own needs all the time? So I was thinking, what skills are required for people to participate without stepping on needs of other people as well. I definitely see empathy as part of it. Being able to empathize with needs of other people.
Well, first of all, you need to notice what the other people need and want, right? Which is sometimes
observation.
Yeah, it's sometimes. I just had this experience of somebody that was very hungry and he didn't say anything, and I did not even put myself in his somebody was Ludwig, who was staying here. He had breakfast much earlier than I am, and I did not think about it. So first of all, you need to.
He was hungry.
He should have said he was hungry, but he was distracted and didn't pay attention to it until he was very hungry. But anyway, noticing that the other person, putting yourself in the shoes of the other person enough to notice that they have needs, and maybe comparing them to what is it that I have needed when I in this similar situation. For example, my husband had he liked everything very ordered, everything in its place, and the house very ordered. And my need for order is much less. So I need to find something that I dislike, to try to say, okay, he feels about things being out of place in the same way that I feel for something else. So this indirect empathy, empathizing for the thing that the person has in their world.
Yeah.
I lost my train of thought.
You were observing our facial expressions. Yeah.
Actually, that'll get me back there. So when you are interacting with somebody and you're watching their facial expressions, which is really difficult in a lot of social situations. But anyway, if you're watching that and their body language, and you're seeing how they're responding to what you're saying, then that's this careful noticing. That's part of it, I would say. Like, there's probably a lot of aspects, but that's one of them. So you go in there with like some care and attention to see how their face is reacting to what you're saying. It gets trickier when you start to say, like, and then imagine what they might be feeling in that moment. Because people are really complicated, and how they're feeling in the moment depends on a lot of stuff. And it's really easy for me to project what's going on for me into the person I'm looking at, or like my own experiences. But I think just noticing, like in the moment, like if you can watch people tune out or get bored or flip to their phone or whatever it is. And if you care and you're noticing all those little things, and then you respond and you say, whatever it is, you can adapt the conversation. Yep. So that's I would say that you are doing that, it would be part of like a participatory level of conversation, of dialogue, that you are noticing those details, and it's meant to be an interactive channel.
That's the one I wanted to go there. Actually, dialogue, Arjuna. Dialogue is one of the things, dialogos is one of the ways you can participate and acquire knowledge, which I don't know, I might conflate it, but that's the way I understand. Participatory knowing is participating with other people as well. So that dialogos to let's say make your understanding on any given subject richer, basically. So am I off here, or is it okay for me to kind of equivocate dialogos and participatory knowing? Valeria.
So I'm thinking, what am I thinking? In order to have true dialogos, you do have to tap into something that goes beyond the propositional level of. So instead of staying just at the level of words and how words fit together in this something that GPT can do, that's just a statistical correlation between statistical links between the terms, and I'm just, yeah, this word relates to that, and then I'm just, in order for the dialogos to really catch, you have to feel it. And in the dialogos exercise, John is always telling us, like, if you're doing things, if you're doing gestures, and the person listening, they're supposed to listen more than the words. They're supposed to listen to the gestures. They're supposed to listen to the body language. So it's tapping at deeper levels of knowing than just the propositional and even the procedural level. So that's the thing that comes to my mind right now. What do you think?
The thing that comes to me there is a participatory aspect of dialogos, as I perceive it, is that you're trying to interact with an idea. Like both people are trying to interact with an idea, and each of them holds that idea in a certain way. Let's just say it's two people. And so I'm trying to navigate that authentically and say, like, well, this is what I see, and this is what I think it's connected to, and how I see it relates to this other thing. And then the other person is also doing that same thing in their head and trying, around this idea. So in a way, you're like participating with the idea, and the other person is sort of providing the interaction of the idea back. Now, both people involved might be kind of clueless about whatever it is they think they're getting at. So it is certainly possible to self-delude, and there can be not helpful things that people can do. But like co-create something that's not real. But I think it is an opportunity for two people to try to navigate each other's mind space about that given topic. And then when somebody might explain like some nuance of like, oh, I always thought that, and then the other person sees like, oh, I didn't even realize that some people don't have a clear distinction in between those two things. Like I understand those two things very distinctly. And now you understand that there are people who would see it this other way. And so now you're like both people in that scenario learned something about this topic that neither one really knew. And so that for me is an example of, an emergent thing that came out because of the interaction of the two people who are trying to participate in Dialogos. I don't know if that was entirely clear.
That was what I was thinking, Matthew. Yeah, Valeria, sorry.
The interesting thing that I'm thinking right now is that if I am very attuned to what I really feel about do I really believe in what I'm saying? Does what I'm saying really match my experience? And if I'm really trying to understand, and if you are really saying things that are in accordance with your experience, and I am really trying to understand it, if we're both doing that, the chances that we are co-creating something that it's not real is much less.
I agree.
Than if we're just talking.
Yeah, like if you're having a wonder conversation, which are lovely, where you say, imagine if it were like this, that's a different thing. Like what you were just describing, I think provides some kind of constraint. And you're like, no, I'm not trying to adopt what you're saying or try to fabricate a thing together. Like we're each trying to understand and clearly say what we see in this thing and see and understand how the other sees that same thing. And then, there's no further aim to like, then they must match. Like that's not there. That's not part of it. Like you're not trying to make them match. You're trying to see where they're different. And then, that leads you to have a more complicated, nuanced understanding usually.
It's like when you have the cup, right? If there was no camera, you could see the handle. I cannot see the handle. So if you're describing the handle to me, and I'm really trying to understand, I get a chance of getting a better picture of what the cup is like. Because I'm paying it. If you try to describe very accurately what you see, and I try to describe very accurately what I see, we have a better chance of seeing the cup the way it is.
Like the elephant in the dark room.
Yeah.
With the wise men.
The blind men.
The blind men each touching a part of it and saying, no, an elephant is like this. And now our lovely host.
Sorry,
Kara.
I was engaging with the audience who is participating. Okay.
It's good. This is a very interesting, by the way, participatory thing that we're doing. I'm very curious to see how this develops because like, we're interacting with one another, and then there's a secondary layer of people watching this and then communicating back up. I don't feel very connected to them because we can't see them and whatnot, but like just the awareness that they're there now makes it a little bit, and they're in the moment.
So
makes it different.
Participatory knowing versus the, let's say, kind of this propositional, let's say. So propositional, but you can't participate. You just like assume, basically. I was thinking about the idea that what if people can't participate? And there was example like people in comments in Twitter, not here, not our lovely live audience here, shout out, but people on Twitter going and commenting about war without ever participating in war. Let's say they only have this theoretical knowledge of it. They read things in books, they see in movies. And then they are participant, yeah, you should do this and you should do that. where reality is just horrendous, and the people who know what it's like, they would never say those things, like people in chat who didn't ever acquire, like who did not partake. So I was thinking about those advisors, let's say, who aren't affected by experience, and yet they keep suggesting what others should do. How important participating in a thing, how important to acquire experiential knowledge in order to give a proper advice. Because I have heard an argument in the past, I give a good advice precisely because I didn't have this experience. And yeah, what do you guys think about that?
I could see it going both ways, but I know which side I would lean to. So if I had, like in this military perspective, if you had done something, made some decisions, and then that had gone very badly for you and for your troops, you would then be hypersensitive to doing that same thing again. And there could be another situation where it's absolutely the right move. Like the strategic people would say, no, that was what you needed to do that second time. But like your human side is like, no, the one time I did that, it was a effing disaster. There's no way. And so that particular commander is sensitive to that particular thing and might never choose to do that again. And that may not be the right reaction in the moment. That might be like an oversensitivity to a thing. The other side, and I won't go too far into it, be if you then have a seasoned commander versus an unseasoned commander, i.e. someone who's had to deal with things in a live situation, they are going to have a lot of participatory experience and things that, aren't in the books, aren't even in the stories. Like their experience of it changed them, changed how they'll react the next time something happens for let's say a good reason. Like they may stop themselves from making snap judgments and set for themselves a rule like, I will have an idea and I will give it 5 minutes before I give any command or whatever. Like they may learn things and become seasoned because of their participation earlier. So that's an example of, somebody being overfit and oversensitive. Or on the other hand, you want somebody who has that participatory experience of it because there are a lot of lessons that they might have learned to become, a better leader for those sort of things because of their prior experience. And I'm thinking the latter is the preponderance, like that earlier case of the oversensitization is not the common case. It's more the seasoned people who have more experience with a thing and participating in it. They have the deeper understanding, and there should be more value given there to what they say versus somebody on the internet who's like, I like insert flag into my bio.
I mean, everything that you know, especially things that you know more deeply, and when you're talking about participatory knowledge, we started by saying that it's the most profound, right? Anything that you know changes you a bit, changes the way you see the world, and it can change it in the way of you knowing, you being able to give better advice because you can see more clearly. It can mean that you give not so good advice because you have your attention skewed in a different way because of the thing that you know so deeply. So I think the problem is here, and I think that's one thing that John is pointing us to, is that we completely have, for a long time, devalued the experiential knowledge and only value the objectivity and impartiality, and thinking that if you know something from the objective perspective, you necessarily always know more. And I think that's a problem, because there are certain types of knowing and that you cannot get from the outside. You only get them from the inside.
So, like in case of war, the relevance is shifted. So the relevance for people who participated is shifted towards other people who have seen, heard, let's say, and people. If you participated in war, chances are it's you're connected to the land, you're connected to the people who are affected. So those are the relevant objects for you. Versus a person on the internet who might be a massive humanist, let's say, and yet the relevance is shifted elsewhere. It might be financial, it might be the, let's say, patriotic things and stuff like that. So acquiring participatory knowledge in something, you also acquire knowledge of what is relevant, because you have the memory of it already. You're easier noticing the things that are important. Well, that's the way I perceive it, actually. Like,
It can go the other way too, though.
yes.
You can get more, for example, if you are betrayed in a relationship, you might get the experiential knowledge of a betrayal might make you less wise for a while, because you are more afraid and less willing to trust, because the relevance, the salience of the possibility of being betrayed is going to be higher,
right,
compared to the salience of trust is going to be lower.
It doesn't seem like that's wrong. I mean, it feels like that's human nature, that you would do that. You know, like right after you're betrayed, you're like, every next thing that happens, you're like, how am I going to be betrayed on this one? Like you want to minimize that perspective, but it feels natural that it's going to be there to some degree, almost justified.
The same mechanisms that make us adaptive are the mechanisms that make us prone to self-deception.
Indeed.
Yes.
I don't think I could say that like you just did.
That's a really good one.
Just before we finish, and we will close it in 15 minutes, there are two things I wanted to bring up is from Wolfie and Upcycle Club. It's a conversation about VR and participating in, let's say, VR training. So let's say the ski simulator that lets Olympic skiers train in virtual reality. Like, I didn't read the science on it. I did not read research on that. Like I was thinking the muscle memory would not be trained via VR, and yet there seems to be like rumored to be actual effects about participating in this sort of training. So what do you guys think about it?
Even imagining can have effects. If you just imagine yourself like, so you train, like, let's say the piano, you train a lot. And if you imagine yourself playing, that can increase a little bit. They did experiments with that. I don't know which skill it was, but.
I'm thinking in the case of the downhill, like a downhill jump. I don't know much about this, but I'm assuming that there's some critical timing. Like if you get a good extension of your legs fully, through the thigh at just the right moment coming off the tip, then you're going to get like the maximum loft that you want and your long hang time or whatever it is you're after. So, and you stick somebody in a simulator for that, and they're seeing the video, they're just got a decent VR going, you get some nice sound, maybe you blow some air on them, they're like, whoosh, it's cold in there, so they're like, they have them wear the goggles, they're really into the whole moment. They still have to like tense their legs at the right instant, and the simulator can read, it's supposed to get some electrodes, and so whenever they tense that thigh muscle, they're like, okay, data point, and they can feed that back into the system and say, oh, well, with that one, you got this far. This is what happened. And they show them and you're like, oh, you did that. And then you crashed. So yeah, you can absolutely train that. You're going to need a sophisticated system. But, then the question is, I guess, what have we done? You've created an experience elsewhere where the same human body response works in a simulator, and it's also useful on this actual slope. And they're not going to be the same. Like when they go down the jump, they're going to go like, whoa, that was a lot more force than I thought it was going to feel like. And so obviously there are going to be different aspects of their training to accommodate that, but they might have trained like the exact timing that they need to be able to hit that, they probably simulate the exact ramp with exact lengths and things like that, so that the jumpers can, in effect, go off that same jump 50 times and get the timing just right. And maybe there's some visual cues on the horizon. Who knows? It could be a lot.
It's not a substitute. It can be helpful,
yeah, it's
but
different.
It's definitely not a substitute.
But it could inform it. And the only reason it's informing is because the simulation is taking so much of it's allowing you to interact with a copy of something, and then you're training yourself to the copy, and then you go out in the real world and it's different, but you have some training. I'm sure that the Marines, I know, use this sort of, they train for missions like that, even making physical mock-ups and such. And then when they get there, they have a familiarity with the terrain, let's say, that, they've never been to that location before, but somehow they know when you get up to this corner in this corridor, you got to go right. Because they train,
I'm thinking about psychological effects, possible ones. Of course, there is a difference if you are going through a simulator or you're actually risking your life going down there. If there would not be pre-learned recklessness in there, because there were cases of children who would, for some reason, they would, let's say, equivocate. They would conflate reality and the video game, and it would have, let's say, really terrible consequences to their lives and even loss of life. I was thinking how to do it safe, like how prepared your mind should be when you're participating in those sorts of trainings. It's like would not it lead to unnecessarily risking your lives sometimes? What do you guys think?
I'm thinking about my husband and his bike. I always talk about Stefan so much. He goes with the bike everywhere since like 20 years. So he knows how the bike works, right? And then he got one of these road bikes that glues the foot to the pedal. And then the reality changed. but he has all this muscle memory. He has all this knowledge of how bikes work. He have all this knowledge of how long he can use to brake and remove the foot from the pedal, and he knows all those things that all of a sudden do not apply anymore because he needs the extra time to unclick the foot and put it down. It's more procedural knowing than participatory, but but it seems related. So if you train the safety of jumping and sloping and whatever, and then all of a sudden it's not safe anymore, the muscle memory might just get engaged and you take risks that you would not take. So I can see where you're coming from, Karen.
I'm sort of thinking in the to bring it back to video games. If you're playing like a warlike game, and you're shooting and this, that, and the other thing, there's a degree of does it make every kid go out and become a shooter? Like you've got to be pretty disturbed to make that jump. And I think that's not a major causative factor, but there are a lot of aspects of that are going to cause you to think that war is like what you're experiencing in that video game. And I suspect that the reality of war is nothing like most of what's in those video games. Like person's shot and they get a bullet. You're like, oh, that one's dead. You're like, yeah, okay. But then you have to walk past that body and you're like, oh, that's a person. And all those moments that would happen in real war that, that's not part of the video game. So anyway, so then for somebody to experience that pseudo reality and say, do it repeatedly or whatever, and have in their mind like, oh yeah, that's what war is like. I've done war. I've been in so many battles, dude, you wouldn't even know. And it gets super tense and you get all agitated. And I understand adrenaline and think that they know what it, they shape themselves to that idea of that's what war is. And then they would have some conversation with somebody whose house was just bombed. And, they're not talking about the same thing. Because
and then they get a gun and shoot their classmates.
Yeah, I mean, that happens. I don't know that the video games pushed it that much for those people. Like they had a lot of other things going on.
They certainly had a lot of other things.
Didn't necessarily help it either. But it just the idea that like that's the idea of a fun game. You're like, what's your funnest game? You're like, oh, we kill things. That's it. That's like a major shoot stuff. I was there when those video games began. We started with Pong, so pretty soon we got bullets. Seemed like the natural next step. But we like our obsession for that is probably the most popular participatory gaming type environment is battles of various sorts. Maybe because it's an easy way to set a framework for a game, but it does end up aiming a lot of people's minds at that, at the concept of war, battle, kill. So maybe not at the level of like go out and shoot up a high school, but sort of setting a background noise.
There is equivocation that might happen. If the game is framed not properly by a child's mind, killing or shooting others may be associated with high score, headshot, like that thing, headshot.
Yeah.
Is headshot is equivocated with dopamine release, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
And
I would say associated with.
Associated with, yes, associated with. Like so if you
like there's a positive affect on that.
positive effect on getting the perfect kill,
Yeah.
let's say. And there might be some cases where it is programmed in a wrong way, and you can get a sense of honor for being talked about on the news, for being shown as a celebrity everywhere. You can be talked for making the most kills. Like there is this reward associated with that. Although I do think those are fringe cases, and yet it is danger. It does happen. Participation. I was thinking about games like reenactment games. They are really fun, and and they're bonding experiences. Do they pose danger or not? If they're misframed. Yeah. But for that we don't have time. So guys, we are finishing in 2 minutes. I would like
Okay.
I would like you to give a couple of minutes of checkout. Starting with Valeria.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity and for the conversation, and knowing the world by interacting with it. I think that's the what is the summing up of the participatory knowing. That's the thing that I'm taking the most with me, that just occurred to me while I was here. And also that I don't know, I think that the thing goes so deep that it's probably, we know, it's things that we know, but we don't know that we know. So that is something that I feel, it's implicit. Yeah, it's implicit knowledge. You don't know that, it doesn't register as knowing. It's just register as how things are, or very good when you move from one culture to the other, and that a lot of this knowings get challenged and all the things that you thought. So those are the things that are in my mind right now that I wanted to leave in the room before besides the thank you.
And I guess I'll end on this distinction between participatory knowing and I guess the depth that can come from actually participating in a thing. A lot of times you don't know what that's going to be ahead of time. You gotta just have to do it, and then you go, oh, I wouldn't even have thought that would have been interesting. Anyway, there's something that comes from participating that you're not going to get from just reading or watching. And so that'd be the thing that I would highlight, that just watching a thing, even if you comment, that's just like the slightest interaction. But actually participating is, there's a lot of value in that.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian and Valeria. I live with understanding that even empathy is trained by participating in more activities with more people. Like you broaden your experience like that, and so you're able to say, oh yeah, I get it. I actually do get it. It rings. Oh, that also rings a bell. Oh yeah, I understand. I didn't like that either. Yeah, it's icky. That thing that I tested is horrible. So you know more by participating. That's what I live with. And Next week, I think we're gonna start 2 hours later than today. I will pre-schedule the live stream on the YouTube channel, and the subject will be relevance realization, which is like I really am looking forward to that one. Once again, thank you to everybody in the live audience. I'm happy, and Valeria and Arjunan, again, thank you. Bye.